All right, awesome. Once again, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Education USA webinar on studying psychology in the US. My name is Aditi, and I'm an Education USA advisor. As I was going through the registration data today, I saw that there are a lot of consistent students who have been attending the webinars that we have done. And I'm sure some of this information that I'm going to talk about in the next minute or so is, you've already heard, but I also see some new students. So I wanted to take a minute and talk about, what Education USA is, who we are, what we do. Education USA, as you can see on the slide, we are your official source on higher education in the United States. Who are we? So we are an organization supported by the US Department of State. In other words, US government. Why do we exist? We exist so that we can give you accurate, comprehensive current information. But being a governmental organization, we represent all the accredited US universities. So more, importantly, in addition to the accurate, comprehensive, and current information, we give you unbiased information. Think about Education USA as student advising center. So we are a global network of student advising centers. As you can see, there are over 400 such centers in more than 170 countries and territories. So if you're joining from India, we are located in 5 different cities in India. So wherever there is a US consulate or a US embassy located, you will also find an Education USA center. So we are located in New Delhi, Kolkata, Hyderabad, Chennai, and Mumbai. So if you're from any of these centers, reach out to your nearest Education USA center. We are happy to, have discussions and, resolve the queries that you might have about any of your application, about application journey. Remember that all Education USA services are free for students or anyone who is interested in pursuing higher education in the US. So what are the ways that you can connect with us? We have a really good website, educationusa.in. Very simple. Educationusa.in will have all the information. In fact, this is really a good repository of wealth of information about the application process. So I would really encourage you to go check the website out. You can go here and even, schedule an appointment with an advisor. There is a lot of information there. I also encourage students to go check out our YouTube channel. You have a question, you're just starting your application journey, you do not know, where to begin with, researching universities, finding the right fit. We have done a lot of different sessions on different themes about the application process. So if you have a question about what goes into a statement of purpose, you've heard that statement of purpose is one of the requirements in your application package. We have multiple such sessions that we have done, in fact, with various, accredited US universities. So go check out our YouTube channel. It's, has a lot of good information for you. We also have an app. You can check that out on, App Store, Google Store. We also do a lot of daily sessions. We in fact do this session called as US Admissions 101. So if you're new to this process, join us on Monday through Friday from 4 to 4:45. We do this session just to give you an overview of what application process looks like, what are application requirements, what are official authentic resources that you should access to find the right information about the application process. And in addition to that, we of course also do specialized webinars and specialized in-person sessions like the one that you are attending today. So keep an eye out. If you have registered for this session, you should be receiving an email, once a week about what are the upcoming sessions. As I told you, for example, I'm joining today from the Mumbai Education USA Center. But let's say Chennai Education USA Center is doing a session that, interests you. You will get to know about this through our email. So keep an eye out. Don't just register for the sessions, but actually, attend the session to actually find out all that wealth of information. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to quickly introduce you guys to the amazing panel that we have today from the Chicago School. So, it's our pleasure to welcome Dr. Ludmi Herath. She is the Director of Global Engagement at the Community Solution Education Systems. I hope I got that right, Ludmi. Um,
Yes, thank
Great.
you.
She's accompanied by Dr. Lynessa Rico. Dr. Rico is the department chair and associate professor of business psychology department. Thank you so much for joining us. And we also have Brian Murphy, who's been traveling around the world. He works with the admissions, office. So all these application requirement questions that you are going to have, Brian is going to be the right person to answer those questions. Um, so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you folks. Please take it, forward, and we'll go to the question and answer section about, around 6:45.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us your time on a Friday afternoon. I know, from a long days of classes or long days of work, you're here today. This is a great step to start. You're actually learning about one, you're learning about, studying in the US, and two, you're learning about the academic programs that you truly want to dive into. Just like Ms. Aditi mentioned, I am Ludmi Herath. I am the Director for Global Engagement. I will briefly introduce myself a little bit, but then we will dive into the session and Dr. Rico will introduce herself through her presentation, and then Brian will introduce himself through his presentation. And one of the things that I do want to mention, I started just like you all sitting here. I started my journey at the Education USA Center when I was a student like yourself. So Education USA Center is very dear to me. And I'm here because of the true amazing advisors that was there to advise me. And look at me, I'm now advising the students. So please do use Education USA centers. They're the primary source for your studying in the US. And like I mentioned, I'm born and raised in Sri Lanka, international student just like yourself, and now lived in the US. And after a few degrees under my belt, I am advising you, and it's one of the greatest honors of my life is, making sure international students get to pick their amazing institution and thrive in their future endeavors. Without further ado, Brian will be moving the slides, as you can see, because we're from multiple different time zones, and you never know when technology issues can rise. So I apologize ahead of time to if anything arises. So we did introduce ourselves. Let's go into agenda. So we're going to quickly go over, we just went over our team, and Dr. Rico is going to talk about MA in Industrial and Organizational Psychology with Business Psychology PhD program with the IO track. Then we're going to touch a little bit about on the STEM program because we do have STEM psychology programs. And keep in mind, folks, this session today is kind of understanding psychology programs in general, in graduate and doctoral programs. And then later on, we will talk about how to apply to any kind of a psychology program. Accreditations is pretty important. So we will touch base on accrediting bodies and why it is important to be looking at accrediting bodies when you're looking at an institution. We will talk about field experiences and you as an international student, what you need to know, how can you boost your profile. And then also we will talk about, studying abroad. I mean, some institutions, especially at the Chicago School, we talk about studying abroad. You are studying abroad in America, but we're going to send you again to a different destination to select study abroad and field experiences. With that, I know we all want funding opportunities, and I have amazing funding opportunities to share across that what Chicago School offers and typically what other US institutions offer. So let's go in, Brian. There you go, Dr. Rico, take it over.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to see everyone on the call. Just very briefly about myself, my name is Dr. Lynessa Rico. I'm the department chair of our business psychology program. My background is working with startups, entrepreneurs, angel investors. and helping them expand their portfolios. So today I'm very excited to share a little bit with you about some of our programs within the business psychology program. So before we jump in here, the one comment I do want to highlight for our programs is I believe that businesses are living, breathing organisms. So in order to help our businesses grow, we really need to understand them from a psychological lens. And that's exactly what all of our students do in our programs in the business psychology program. So next slide, please. All right, so first I'd like to introduce you to some of the career opportunities. So when you think business psychology, what is business psychology and what can I do with it? Well, the beautiful thing about business psychology is the skills that you're going to learn and that I'm going to explain to you are very transferable across different industries. So our students will go on to be working in a variety of industries. So they'll go on to be VP of DEI, consultants, people listeners, data analysts, consultants, either internal or external. A lot of our students actually go on to start their own businesses. And then if you're interested in market research is also a great opportunity that we see a lot of our students go into after our program, in addition to any type of leadership development. So if you're interested in developing teams and executives, that's also a great career path for our students. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so these are the three programs that we have. So our business psychology degrees actually focus on MAIO, which I'll explain a little bit more here with you next. So industrial and organizational psychology. We also have a couple PhD programs with some specific tracks of interest, which is also in IO, industrial organizational psychology, consulting, and we have a PhD organizational leadership program. So for the time that I'm here with you today, I'm going to explain two of those programs to you, the first of which is the MAIO program. Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to explain to you our ground Masters of Industrial and Organizational Psychology program. So if you are interested in people and what makes the beautiful thing about people, teams, how can I focus on individuals, developing teams, how can that contribute to organizational success and growing a business? This program is a perfect fit for you. So if you're really excited about learning more about people, analytics, maybe assessments, recruiting strategies. Again, this is exactly what this program focuses on. So it focuses on designing jobs and applying psychology specifically to the workplace. So this particular program is 40 credits. So it takes 2 years full-time to complete. We do have a part-time track, and students can complete that part-time track in 3 years. So our full-time students will take 3 classes a term. And we meet 3 terms, fall, spring, and summer. So all of our courses are offered in the evenings for about 3 hours. We're engaged in activities. So imagine being engaged in hands-on activities, group discussions, playing games, really applying what you're learning throughout the week. That's exactly what we do in the evenings. Our classes are offered in the evenings because a lot of our students have internships or they'll work during the day. They're active in our community. So the flexibility of our program allows our students to come work, engage in the community during the day, and we come together at night in our classes. This program does have 2 internship courses. So an internship is required in our program. Our students, there is a 100% placement rate for our internships. Our students will enter internships in the second year of the program. So you take the first year and you dive into all sorts of different IO psychology criteria and competencies, and then you go off and you do an internship. This internship can actually be completed anywhere around the world. So this particular course is an online course that helps guide you and mentor you and coach you through that internship. So we have a lot of students that take their internships in Chicago or our different campus locations, but we also have lots of students that take the internship anywhere in the United States as well as anywhere around the world. We also have a thesis track, which is those students that are really, really interested in research. We pair you with a faculty member and you could dive into research. These students are also maybe interested in their PhD. So if you're interested in continuing on to a PhD track, that diving into research is a great opportunity for you. The last 2 things I want to highlight is Ludmi had talked a little bit about our study abroad options. So the beautiful thing about the Chicago School and our program is we do offer our students and study abroad once a year. Our specific study abroad, for example, for this year is in Italy. We're going to focus about the psychology of creativity. So someone had asked a question in our chat today about AI. So this particular course, for example, that our students will learn about AI, how different technology tools through Microsoft. Will actually be visiting Microsoft in Milan, in Italy is where we're going to be visiting. And they're going to lead us through different AI tools to enhance the creativity of our teams and organizations. And so that's an example of a really exciting international study abroad class that we offer to our business psychology students to enhance the creativity, our own creativity skills, but also that of our teams and the organizations that we work in. Final bullet is our classes are offered on ground, which I mentioned earlier. So one course is one evening a week is when we meet. Okay. So next slide, please. All right, just a very quick overview of these are some examples of our internships sites where our students have gained internship and earned some experience. So we have partnerships with companies throughout the United States, as well as through where our campuses are located, like Chicago, DC, Dallas, and California. So our students have had internships or fellowships, for example, at Microsoft, Gallup Consulting, analyzing data. Also, Novavax. Novavax is, as everyone knows, one of the pharmaceutical companies that developed the COVID vaccination. So we have lots of different partner opportunities for you to apply and gain some really great experience with our internship partners. Next slide, please. So the last thing I'd like to share with you today is a little bit about our PhD business psychology program. So for our Masters of Industrial and Organizational Psychology students, after you graduate from that program, for those of you that might be interested in your PhD, that program actually is a great opportunity and enables you to apply to our PhD business psychology program. So the biggest difference between a PhD program and a master's program is research. So in a PhD program, if you're passionate about IO and learning more about teams and organizations, this program allows you to do a really big deep dive to not only build your researcher skills, so you're learning how to be a researcher, but you also do a deep dive in that content. And again, how you can build teams using assessments, data, and then enables you to dive into a specific research area that you're interested in. So I won't go into a lot of details here because of the time we have with you, but what I do want to say is that you can finish the PhD program in as little as 3.5 years to 5 years, depending on your research. And this program is an executive program, so our students meet one weekend a month to allow you to work. So it's a great flexibility that we offer in the PhD program. So with that, next slide, please. And then I'm going to toss it to Brian to share a little bit about our counseling degrees.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rico. So hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Dr. Herath, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. My name is Brian Murphy. I'm one of the international student recruiters and admissions counselors at the Chicago School. I've been working in admissions for 8+ years now, traveled all over the world doing recruitment events. So feel free to ask your questions at the end. I sure hope I'll be able to answer all those questions for you. So I'm just going to dive into a different area of psychology or of counseling in general. So before I get into specific programs, I do just want to highlight that in the US, there is a difference between counseling and psychology. So when you think of counseling, what it really means in the US is going to be helping clients improve their emotional well-being, managing life challenges, developing like healthy coping strategies. So you may think of this as people maybe dealing with anxiety, depression, grief, maybe relationship issues, things of that nature. So they tend to be a little bit more mild or moderate mental health concerns. That's going to be on the contrary to psychology, which is a little bit more of a deeper dive, focuses more on the human mind and behavior, understanding psychological processes, and if you were to move on to be a psychologist, you're going to be doing more diagnoses and treatments as well as research. You can think of this as, your main disorders that are out there, like schizophrenia or maybe bipolarism. So I just wanted to briefly touch on the difference there. Now to get into counseling degrees that are offered in the US. There's a lot of different varieties out there. They all may have different names, but in a nutshell, a few of them that are offered are going to be like this one displayed here, which is a master's in clinical mental health counseling. There's also like marriage family therapy, forensic counseling, and I can't remember the other one I was thinking of, but those are different varieties that you can choose. Um, they will all lead to similar licensure, though, which tend to be an LPC or an LPCC. Um, Stands for Licensed Professional Counselor or Licensed Professional Clinical Counselor. Now, these counseling degrees will tend to be offered at the master's level, meaning that they will be shorter than a PhD or a PsyD program, typically 2 to 3 years long. Okay. At the Chicago School, our particular program in clinical mental health counseling is offered both on campus and online. So it is something that you might want to look into. And even though we offer this program online and it does lead to licensure, you can still do this program from your home country. And although your country may not require the license, if you did ever want to come to the US to sit down for the exam, once completing the program, you would be eligible for that. So next slide here. So different career opportunities within counseling. So what's really great about counseling and psychology in general is that it is applicable in almost every single industry, right? Because anywhere that you're dealing with people, you're going to need counselors and psychologists to help. So, just some basic examples of where you can work. If you were to graduate with a degree in clinical mental health counseling, you could work in a private practice, working with individuals, couples, or families that may be dealing with trauma or, depression, possibly even abuse. You could work at a mental health clinic. You could work in hospital settings, working with medical professionals who maybe are working within a psychiatric ward or a behavioral health unit. You can work at a normal company, like some of the options that Dr. Rico had mentioned. Within the HR department, most of the times there will be a counselor there to help with employees dealing with work stress or maybe their personal issues. And then obviously there's academia, and you can work as a school counselor, helping students navigate maybe the stresses of choosing a PhD program or a master's program. Um, the next opportunity after getting a master's in this field is you can go on to do a PhD in counselor education and supervision. So this is where if you wanted to, you could still offer your services to clients, but if you wanted to take that next step and kind of supervise and get to management level, that's what that PhD is going to teach you to do. Again, you could be a department administrator, work as a clinic administrator, as well as a faculty member at a school if you wanted to, maybe focus on research or just teach. So those would be some of the options. At the Chicago School, we offer both of these programs. And similarly to the master's, the PhD in counselor education and supervision is offered on campus as well as online. The PhD programs will tend to be a minimum of at least 3 years. If you do choose the online option, that can, typically extend that a little bit longer, just because it does add that flexibility of taking the classes at your leisure. Next is clinical psychology. So as I mentioned, there is a difference between counseling and psychology. So at the Chicago School, this is our flagship program, is the PsyD in clinical psych. It is a degree that focuses on the practical experience in behavioral sciences. So as I mentioned, this is where you're going to be dealing with more severe conditions and disorders. Within clinical psychology, though, there are specializations or different emphases that you can focus on. So a few examples here are like forensic psychology. So if you wanted to be a psychologist, but within a certain area, such as working within the criminal justice system, so potentially working with police officers that maybe have gone through traumatic events, working within the family court systems, things of that nature. Then there's obviously neuropsychology, with I'm sure many people are familiar with. And then there's health psychology. This is just the integration of somewhat physical health, focusing on how individuals, maintain their diets or their lifestyles, mixed in with their mental health as well. And then there's child and adolescent psychology, which again is self-explanatory. So when you when you're deciding which area that you want to get into, the good thing about most US programs is that it's not something you have to decide right away when you enter the program. Typically, it's decided, within the first or second semester that you're at school. So you do have a little time to take some classes, learn a little bit about these different areas before choosing which path you want to go down. And with that said, just because you choose a specialization or an emphasis, doesn't mean that's the one that you have to focus on when you become a psychologist. It's just an area of focus that you had. Doesn't mean that you're limited to just that one area. Another thing I wanted to mention about the difference between counseling and psychology, I mentioned it before. So the counseling degrees are going to be, or typically at the master's levels, are going to be 2 to 3 years long, whereas a PhD or a PsyD in clinical psych is a little bit longer. You're looking at about 5 years. And the main reason for this is that many of these programs are post-bachelor's, meaning you can go right into the program without having a master's degree, just a completed bachelor's. So I know that we get a lot of students who sometimes already come in with a master's in clinical psych because they think that's the natural progression. Now, that is totally acceptable when you can come in with a master's, but I do want to make it clear that it is not necessary. Simply having a bachelor's degree will make you eligible to enter into a clinical psych program at most schools, specifically the Chicago school. Other areas or career outcomes that you can get, just like with counseling, psychologists can work in a huge variety of fields. You can work in clinics, private practices, hospitals. You can work for government agencies or nonprofit agencies that focus on developing mental health policies. So a lot of different opportunities. And then obviously there's educational institutions. So with a PsyD or a PhD in the US, you are allowed to work in academia. You are also considered an expert witness in court if you ever needed to work with the court systems and testify. So a lot of different opportunities. And last thing I want to mention, since it's showing the median salary, is that if you're going obviously for a PhD or a higher level degree, that will typically translate into somewhat better of a salary as well. So other factors to consider when deciding if you want to stay at the master's level or move on to a PsyD PhD. Another thing we wanted to highlight is different fieldwork opportunities. So specifically at the Chicago school, you have a lot of practicum and internships. So pretty much any program that leads to licensure is going to require that you do some type of supervised hours. So all the programs I mentioned there have a form of practicum or internship involved. So that's what's really great about the Chicago school is that not only do you get to learn the theoretical practices, but also apply them when you're in school so that you're best prepared once you start your career. Oh, real quick about that too, is that when you go for these internships and practicum, there is a 100% placement rate. And we do have a director of clinical training that helps you apply for these sites and make sure that you are best set up when you begin working at those sites as well. So we give a lot of support within the practicums and internships. So just some other programs that we do offer at the Chicago School specifically, and just other fields within psychology. You have like applied behavior analysis, you have behavioral economics, which is another kind of like business psychology program. You have international psychology, again, a lot with developing mental health policies. And then you have like school psychology. So feel free to reach out to me or anybody else on my team if you are interested in one of these other options that we didn't do a deeper dive into. One of the last things I'm going to touch on is the importance of accreditation. So, accreditation is important because it shows that that program is aligned with the best practices within that field. It makes sure that it's being upheld to certain standards that you're going to be looking for. And it will also help you be more distinguished and stand out more once you go apply for specific jobs. Some jobs, even in the US, require that you have or that you have graduated with a accredited program. You often see this with clinical psychology, a bit less with the counseling programs, but it still is important if a program is CACREP accredited. So those are just some of the different options in terms of accreditation.
Okay, I'm going to talk about some of the other features that you as a student that is going into psychology should look into when you are researching your institution. Now, I know Brian talked about accreditations, and I know when you do visit EdUSA advisors, they will also stress about the accreditations because certain academic fields, it is critical that you look at the accreditation. So if you're going into psychology, APA, American Psychological Association accreditations, and then also CAPE, ABAI. So these are extremely important accreditations. So when you are looking over 4,000 schools in the US, this is a very critical component that you need to make sure that that institution is properly accredited through all the accrediting governing bodies, because if you do go from a master's to a PhD, and your master's is not from a certain accrediting body institution, then you may not be able to go into that designated PhD or doctoral program. So next slide, Brian. So with that, I do want to touch base on some other experiences, right? I mean, you guys you are interested in psychology, counseling, behavioral programs, and which means very unique niche programs, which also means we want to give you the opportunities to learn about other countries. What is happening in Italy? Just like Dr. Rico mentioned, the business psychology students are going to go into Italy for 2 weeks, I believe, and then going to learn about AI and how psychology and AI and business psychology is going to be working together. Same with forensic psychology. So the forensic psychology program that we have in master's level will take students to South Africa and then work with the prison system. So there are programs that institutions will mandate or require you to study abroad and take that experience. Because looking at numbers, we know that with the population of American students, less than 5% of American students studies abroad. So when you do study abroad and you have that robust experience in your resume with that experience, I mean, imagine being a forensic psychologist and going into South Africa. Now you have something to talk about South Africa, not just the skills and training you're now getting from America, but you're also getting it from another country, South Africa or Italy. So these are some of the destinations that our students are studying abroad. So when you're looking into that program, make sure that these features are included, these opportunities are there, because after all, you're investing funding to get the best experience out of your academic program. Next slide, please, Brian. One of the other things that I do want to bring up compared to Dr. Rico and Brian is looking at Department of Labor Statistics. So these numbers were pulled a few months ago, and you can see the trends that's happening in the computer science and the engineering fields coming in, and you can see healthcare practitioners and technical side. I mean, you can see how the shift is happening with the Department of Labor Statistics. Now, this is a great resource. See, like, what are the trends? And the Department of Labor Statistics will actually show you a trend of until 2036. So you can have a very good snapshot of how the Department of Labor predicts the fields are going to be in the up and coming fields for the next few years. Next slide, please. Briefly, I'm going to touch on the Chicago School. We have multiple different locations. As you can see from the slide, we are located in metropolitan cities. So if you look at them, they're not small towns. They are big metropolitan cities. We're in Chicago, also LA, Dallas, Washington, and Anaheim. Anaheim and LA, of course, in California. Dallas is in Texas, and Washington, D.C. is Washington, D.C. So any city that you're interested in, and that is also another factor to look into, is where is the campus located? Because if your program requires internships, like most psychology programs do, then you do need to be in a city that internship opportunities are readily available. Hence why we are located in metropolitan cities, because most of our programs requires internships and practicums, which you as a psychology student or going into the psychology counseling behavioral sciences program should look into. I do need to look into a program that actually gives me practicum or field experiences way before I graduate and not wait until I graduate to gain that experience. Next slide, please. One of the other ones is, looking at curriculum practical training and optional practical training. And I know, just like Ms. Aditi mentioned, most of you have attended this session, so you are pretty familiar with CPT, OPT, curricular practical training and optional practical training. No, every school offers that, so that is something to look into. So if the program does require to have practicums and internships, the university or that institution will endorse the curricular practical training. And of course, after you graduate, you all are eligible for optional practical training. And usually optional practical training is for 12 months. But if you do select a STEM program, then you get additional 24 months with a total of 36 months. STEM is science, technology, engineering, mathematics endorsement. And you'll be amazed, psychology programs are also STEM. And at the Chicago School, we have 2 STEM designated psychology programs. They are the industrial and org psychology, as well as the PhD in business psychology with the IO track. But there are some institutions may offer you STEM programs in forensic psychology. So there are STEM programs available at many, many campuses, but at Chicago School, we offer the 2 STEM designated programs. And we guide through the students from the beginning. If you're coming in as a master's student, you will understand about OPT and CPT from your very first semester. We will never let you wait till the very last semester for you to apply for, the curricular practical training or optional practical training. Pretty important 2 items that you need to look in for when you're researching your next institution. Next slide, please. Let's talk about scholarships, right? We all want to know about funding. So like I mentioned, I started off as an international student. I was an international student in my bachelor's, my master's level. So yes, I needed scholarships. I needed the most affordable campus that I can go into. So I totally understand when all of you want funding also. So one of the things is, please note that funding does not come automatically. You need to first be accepted. And in most cases, you may have to submit a secondary application for funding, or you may be given an automatic scholarship. Now, if you're looking for like teaching or GA positions, make sure that, the institution you're applying to have those opportunities, and then start your application way early. I typically tell students, give yourself 9 to 12 months at least to make sure that this process is smooth and done correctly, and you are well informed. At the Chicago School, we have multiple different scholarships, and that's, again, many institutions do offer multiple different scholarships. That is to make studying in the U.S. affordable. So a few of the ones that I'm going to talk about is we have something called Local Advantage Scholarship, which is if you are a U.S. student, like you are an international student but studied or got your master's or your bachelor's in American university, and now you want to come into the Chicago School to do your master's or your PhD, you get an automatic 25% off tuition, which is pretty amazing, because that is actually to say that, we understand that you have spent money during all this time, so we want to make sure that we give you a affordable tuition option for you to continue your education. We also have a merit scholarship, which is if you maintain a certain GPA, you will get up to 15% tuition scholarship each term. Just like Dr. Rico mentioned, our programs can be fall, spring, and summer, so 3 terms. Now think about 15% or 25% in 3 terms. That adds up for your yearly scholarship amount. We also have Global Partnership Scholarship. I mean, we are working with many institutions in India, and those partnership students, for example, if you're coming from ABC University in India, we can offer 20% tuition scholarship for you as well. So if you're somebody who's at a psychology program at your university and truly wants us to build a partnership, connect with us, that makes your tuition very low coming through a partnership program. Then, of course, other scholarships that any other institution offers is Presidential Scholarship, Dean Scholarship, so many scholarships. But keep in mind, you cannot apply for a scholarship until you're accepted into the program. And I'll tell you why that is. Most departments will not want to award scholarships until we know that you are an admissible student. Because sometimes students will tell us, oh, I have a 3.8 GPA, I have this essay, but until you're officially accepted, students will not be awarded scholarships or GA and TA positions. Some campuses will have the initial conversations with GATA students, but until that application is submitted and you're accepted, no official GATA position will be offered to you. So again, do your research early on, give yourself 9 to 12 months, and then prepare your application. Visit Education USA centers, prepare your application. Let's go into the next one. Another one is you can work on campus. So on-campus employment is limited to 20 hours during term. Term means when school is in session, and 40 hours when school is not in session. And we hire a lot of international students. So right now I have a student who's working for me from Ahmedabad, and she is a master's MAIO student. So at any point, if you want to connect with the student and learn of a perspective from a student, please reach out. How to apply as an international student? It's always very similar from school to school, right? Some basic items we need. We, of course, need your official transcript. All of universities will require you to have your transcript evaluated. So we know that, whether you're coming from a 3-year degree or a 4-year degree, are you coming with 120 credits or are you coming with 90 credits? And then what kind of a master's? So we absolutely need that. And most universities will have discounted rates for these credential evaluations. I know the Chicago School does. And connect with them, and then they can really cut down the cost of your credential evaluation report. And keep in mind, this credential evaluation report is needed for your curricular practical training, because any company that is going to hire you, they will want to know your degree authentication from degrees outside of the US. Your resume CV, now is the time for you to brush up your resume and your CV and make sure you have a robust CV and your resume. In most psychology programs, we'll ask for recommendation letters, an essay, and of course your English proficiency test. And depending on the school, they may have additional items, like they may want you to do an interview with the faculty, and they may want you to present. So there are some additional requirements depending on your institution and depending on your program. Let's go into the next one. I'm being very mindful of time. Test scores, this is very common. Test scores for a psychology master's or a PhD program. GRE scores are probably required by some programs and some schools. I know in our case, some PsyD programs may require GRE scores, but many institutions are going away from GRE scores. Now, if you're looking for scholarships or GATA positions, depending on the institution and programs, they may require GRE scores. But most of our programs at the Chicago School, we don't require GRE scores. We don't want to put that barrier on students because it's another payment, another delay. And so because of that, the GRE is waived in most programs, but there are a few programs that still accepts GRE. Let's go into the next slide. How can you get involved with any kind of, like, with not just the Chicago School, but if you want to learn about the field, many campuses will have blogs, many campuses will have podcasts. The Chicago School has an amazing podcast that you can just go and listen to. And I know this session is going to be on YouTube. So Chicago School also has YouTube channels with presentations from faculty. Every school has a YouTube channel. So just like, Dr. Aditi mentioned that, you need to do some research because, you're coming in as a graduate student, unless you're coming in as an undergraduate student. But if you're coming in as a graduate or a doctoral student, some knowledge and some research you need to do from your part and understand, because that kind of shows the institution that you're ready for the rigor of the American academic curriculum in a master's and a PhD level. And if you want to briefly touch with an international student, like I said, our student from Ahmedabad, international admissions at the Chicago School, we will love to connect you with her. She's amazing. amazing. She has WhatsApp, and she was in India for the break, and then she was WhatsApping students. So we're not just, getting students to the Chicago school. We're actually educating and advocating to the field of psychology, behavioral sciences, and counseling across the world. I know it is a very rising field, and when I was in India and Brian was in India, our booth was swamped. I mean, there were students beeline. We were late one time, I think, for the Delhi event because our flight got late. We were late by 10 minutes, and we saw like 30 students lined up. That alone tells us the field of psychology is rising in India, and which is great because that tells us that we are caring about people's mental health and counseling, mental well-being. Next slide. Again, a few ways that you can connect with us. We can go into the Q&A one, and I do from Q&A slide, Brian. And I do know that I know I mentioned this to you. I'm a huge advocate for Education USA. I cannot say good things enough about Education USA. They're the reason why I'm in this field, and they're the reason why I had a very successful career in my field. Trained me pretty well. I got all the amazing information. Please use the Education USA advisors. They're here to assist you, and you can start your whole process with them. So that's my last bit of advice for all of you. And we're open for questions. And unfortunately, Dr. Rico had to step out because she has an early morning class. So she had to quickly step out.
Thank you so much, guys. And thank you, Ludmi, for advocating for Education USA. We really appreciate that. I would request, students to put in your questions in the chat box. But until, students start asking questions, I have, some common queries that we get asked in our office here in Mumbai. One of the things that, it's very common with students who want to pursue graduate programs in psychology is that a lot of them come with an undergraduate degree, which has been 3 years long, as opposed to the typical 4 years long undergraduate degrees in the US. So can you, one of you can kind of elaborate, how do students, think about that? Do they need to do like a first year of master's before they even apply to the US? Just give us a little, insight.
I can take on that, and then Brian can add additional insights. We have some good news. About a couple of years ago, we changed a few years ago, it's 3 years versus 4 years, right? So if a program is 3 years, I'm sorry, you need to do additional classes to make up the 4 years. Now, one of the changes that happened a couple of years ago is instead of looking at 3 years, we look at the total number of credits that you have completed. In most cases, that the programs that are 3 years that you all are finishing in 3 years will come up to about 120 credits or more. Some programs, I have seen some programs will come up to about 109. Very rarely that I have seen credits for 90. If you have 90 credits, then what we do is we actually work with the department because we need to have you to come up to that 120 credits. That makes sense though, right? It has nothing to do with 3 versus 4. It's the weight of that credit. We need the 120 credits because under the laws of the US education, a bachelor's degree is 120 to 128 credits. But now that's why we need the credential evaluation report because they will tell us that. If I went on to every school and I tried to look at the credentials, I'm going to fail miserably for the amount of universities India has. So this is why that we ask you to get these services done because it will give us an accurate picture of how many credits you're coming with. Now, let's say that you did a 3-year degree and you also did a master's degree, and now your total credits is, 150. Great. In most cases, we have seen students come up with a master's also. So that alone makes it also eligible to come in. So again, don't worry about your 3 versus 4. Just pay attention to the number of credits you're coming in. And that's what we are looking at. And if you are a person that is coming with 90 credits, do not get discouraged. We have ways that we can get you enrolled and we can see you pursue to your master's and your doctoral program. Anything to add, Brian?
I was just going to say real briefly, it's important to just reach out to each university. Everyone has different policies, so sometimes they could substitute work experience if you are short of some credits. But again, those are our policies specifically for the Chicago school.
Thank you, guys. And I will also add, for the accreditation process, it can be lengthy. It requires a lot of details. So please do not wait until the final week of the deadline for, the university applications. As, Ludmi has been mentioning, that start the process as early as possible. When you are going to submit your application for evaluations, you might get stuck at some point. You have to factor in, the time that you might lose because of technical issues, just documents not getting uploaded or whatever the reasons are. So start this process early. As they have mentioned, if you are interested in applying to say the psychology program at the Chicago school, reach out to them. If it can bring down the cost of the evaluations, please utilize these opportunities. But if you do this, with proper planning and time management, you will be in a pretty good shape in terms of your application. Now, my second question to you guys is that, when I'm sure you have been going through hundreds of applications for masters and, PsyD and PhD programs, specifically talking about master's program, what can students do to strengthen their applications? Because I honestly believe it's not just the application, that you send out that, is a strong application. It's in fact those 3 years and how you utilize your undergraduate years or 4 years of undergraduate, degree program that actually speaks for the strength of your application. So from the Indian context, what are some of the things that, you think can help students, think about when they're actually pursuing their undergrad to include, to strengthen their applications when they come to a stage to apply to the US?
I can take and then Brian can add. Most I would say is I know internship and experience is a huge key factor. Again, depends on the institution and the school and what requirements they're looking for. But to strengthen in overall of your application, internships, practicums, if internships and practicums are not available, because in some destinations it's very difficult for students to get internships and practicums, shadowing and make that shadowing so important and meaningful. Just don't try to do 50 things, do meaningful quality 3 items in a bachelor's level or master's level, and prepare your essay. I mean, and I'm telling you this because we read so many essays. We know you apply for 5, 10 schools. Please be very careful how you are copying and pasting your essay, and do your research and writing an essay. Please, we read essays. If somebody said that, nobody reads this, we read the essay. So let me get that very clear. We read the essay. So put your mind to that essay. And even if you don't have the practical or the internship experience, tell us about what you did in your undergraduate days or what you did with your master's program. Did you do a post presentation? Did you co-teach a class? Did you teach? Did you volunteer? Anything of these is going to be of importance. And anything to add, Brian?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that, if you don't have like research experience or you don't have internship opportunities, you don't need this big event or this big display, to show to us. But just simple things as maybe starting a support group on campus to, say that you got some students together to talk on, mental health issues. Little things like that go a long way. Anything that shows that you're taking initiative are things that we like to see, at least specifically at the Chicago school, and I'm sure is true to most other universities. So again, you don't always have to think big picture. Just little small things and taking initiative will be noticed.
Great. Another very important, question that we get asked by students is about the licensure. It's something that comes after you've graduated, but the process to prepare for it starts way early. And in one of, your slides, you mentioned about the support that, the Chicago School offers to students. So can you, one of you can kind of elaborate what that looks like, and what does that, that support actually translates, so that students can actually relate to it. And when they're looking and researching universities, they can, actually look up this information on various US university websites.
Sure. I'll take over for this one. So, firstly, for licensure, it's very important to look at what how many supervised hours are needed, because a lot of times for licensure, you do need to practice hands-on to get that experience before they're willing to let you even sit for the license exam. Right. And let me backtrack real quick. So typically there are three things that are needed to get licensed. You need to have the actual degree, you need to have the supervised hours, and then at least in the US, particular states sometimes require specific courses. So each state may not require course A, B, C. They may require just A and B. Other states may require course C and D. So you want to make sure that wherever you want to get licensed in the US, that you that particular state, that the program that you're doing will meet that specific state's licensure requirements. So for the US, that's super important. And then next, in terms of support and how to set that up, is since there are supervised hours and you will be working at specific sites, you need to find out if that university helps you when applying to those sites. Because just like with any other job, you submit an application, you submit a body of work or a portfolio to that employer. So at the Chicago School, we have a director of clinical training for each of these programs, and they're there to just be like your advisor. There's going to be an application period. So usually in the fall, you'll start applying, and then those will be internships that you get for the spring. So in that fall period, we have a professional development course. Usually it's 1 credit where you work with that director of clinical training and kind of just advise you on what sites you might want to work at, what is needed, and maybe your strengths and weaknesses. They'll also do little mock interviews if a certain site requires a interview. So those are just kind of basic things that we offer at the Chicago School, and items that you might want to look at other schools to see if they offer similar support.
Um, Thank you. I think that's very insightful. My next question, is when we're talking about psychology, not everyone thinks about the interdisciplinary nature of this field of study. So I wanted to ask you about, how in your experience, students who are pursuing masters in different psychology programs, have actually, taken the interdisciplinary route and have, incorporated different fields of study. And what does that look like? Just give us like some experiences of students that you know of, if that can help our audience. Also, Brian, can I request you to go to the previous slide so that your contact information stays on YouTube? Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure. And I'm sorry, if you could just repeat the question. So do you mean in the sense of, since psychology is applicable to like all different industries, like how it could be interdisciplinary that way, or
So
is
someone
that?
who who's studying psychology, can they also do maybe advanced statistics course? Is that something, intersection of psychology? If you can think perhaps of other fields that, in your experience you have seen, especially, from a context of international students who have taken that route while studying psychology.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And yeah, I think Dr. Rico and the business psychology programs are just kind of perfect examples of that, right? Where I believe, as she mentioned, some of our students had gone into like kind of data analyst roles within psychology, right? So that is, what I was mentioning before is the beauty of it is anything where people are, psychology and those skills are going to be applicable. So, I mean, I know some of our students who begin a program, right, thinking I'm going to be a counselor therapist, then end up, by the end of it, realizing that, maybe they want to get more into business psychology because they took a elective that was, more business psychology focused. So, again, I don't have any more specific examples of that, but I do know that it happens often, and it is a possible outcome for many students.
And I do want to add to Brian, one of the good examples that I have is students that are in engineering field, right? I mean, whether you're in machine learning or computer engineering, mechanical engineering, we see a lot of the students, instead of doing an MBA, we see them going into an MAIO, Master's, MA, Masters of Arts in Industrial and Organizational Psychology, because, one of the things that we see students is that they will be an engineer. You're always an engineer because now you do have an engineering degree, but then diversifying your academic profile now going into MAIO, because as an engineer, you're always working in an organization, unless even if you own an industry, you still have a team of people, and understanding the industrial and organizational aspects of that psychology not just helps you to thrive as a leader, but also gives you an understanding of a very different realm for general work overall. One of the things that we see students doing is, they'll have computer engineering and they're going back again to a master's in computer engineering and then to a PhD in computer engineering. What we want to do is, we want students to think about, okay, where are you going to use the engineering skill in an organization? But if you want to thrive in that organization, you need to understand how the organization functions. And so we see many students replacing the MBA with MAIO, because we always say MAIO program is the MBA version of the psychology program, plus it's STEM. So some MBAs are not STEM, but MAIO is STEM. So that's the most example that we see, is how students with very different backgrounds from bachelor's level coming into the MAIO field.
Great. That's a really good insight. Yeah. Brian, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just gonna say one last thing. I actually just was listening to a podcast like earlier this week, and one of the things they're talking about was like, where do they see tech jobs in the future, and what are prominent roles and what's important. And one of the things that they mentioned was, moving away, obviously the technical skills are important, but kind of looking maybe more bigger picture, and kind of what you were saying is interdisciplinary, because it's all about user experience now. And you may be a computer engineer, but you need to then understand the psychology of like, well, the people using it. So that's where psychology would play a great role, or complementary to your engineering skills, is understanding people and how they will interact with whatever technology you
Absolutely.
might be using.
Absolutely. And I must also add, a lot of students who apply to human computer interaction programs, psychology is an important component of their curriculum, because without having that understanding, you wouldn't really know how that interaction can work. Great. So we've got two questions. I hope you guys have a couple more minutes to answer. One question has been asked, that how many letters of recommendations are required for master's program? I think you already mentioned, but just go ahead and.
Sure. Well, so again, speaking just for the Chicago school, it's going to vary depending on the program. We have some programs that just require one letter, others that require three. Typically, just a rule of thumb, if you're looking at our like PhD or PsyD programs, it's going to be three, majority of the time. And then for the masters, anywhere from 2 to 3. Other schools, though, it's going to depend on them specifically.
Oh, thank you. And we also, I've got one question. I think it's a very interesting question, that the student wants to know, do they have to be from psychology background to apply for clinical or counseling, psychology master's program? Someone coming from, say, business or arts or science background, without having that internship or practicum, experience, can they apply for these programs?
Yeah, love that question, and I'm actually sorry I didn't highlight that, so that's super important. So no, you don't need a full degree typically in psychology or in counseling. So especially at the master's level, typically, again, just speaking for the Chicago school, the barrier of entry is quite easy. You just need one intro to psych course, and then typically another statistics or like a research methods. At the PsyD level, though, the PhD level. Typically, those will require a little bit more of a background, but even for our PsyD, since it is a post-bachelor's program, as I mentioned, there is just 6 courses that you need in psychology. So just 6, and if you have those covered, you could still have a background in mathematics or something else.
Sounds great. And the student who's asked this question, please get in touch, with Ludmi or Brian. They have shared their contact information. My only request would be that be specific in writing the subject of the email, and ask specific questions in the email, that you actually want to know. But I think we have run out of time. I really want to thank both of you for taking time out, presenting this content. It's very, important for students to have access to this information so that they can be informed in making the right decisions, to apply to the right school, to apply to the right program. So we really appreciate that. Thank you very much again, Ludmi, for coordinating everything, and letting this happen. So, and I hope to collaborate again in the future. And I also wanted to thank, the audience. You've been patient and you've been asking good questions. So thank you for that. Any last words from both of you, and then we will close the session.
No, just thank you all so much. And, Aditi, thank you so much for having us. This is pretty amazing. Like I said, Education USA holds a very dear place in all of us. And we actually, one of the things we want to say is, if you simply mention to us that you came from Education USA, you become our priority in responding to your inquiries and then helping you out. So thank you all so much. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Brian?
Yeah, no, just thank you so much for having me. And again, that was my contact information. That's my WhatsApp number. So if you do have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, guys. And I hope to see you next time you are in India for the recruitment tour.
We will not miss India.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody.